So many parents this year are facing really tough decisions about remote schooling versus homeschooling. I talked a little bit about this last year when COVID hit and schools began to send students home. And I honestly didn't foresee that we would still be in this situation for this coming school year. And so I know with all of the changes with schools enforcing certain rules or not enforcing certain rules, lots of parents are really struggling with what to do. And many students in our school district, I believe I read yesterday, there was over 4,000 students in our school district that were now quarantining and doing remote schooling. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about today is helping to hopefully clarify sort of the differences between remote schooling and homeschooling to help you make the best decision for yourself, for your kids, for your family as a whole. If you would like to continue on with remote schooling through the public school system, or if you would like to move into homeschooling. So hopefully I can help sort of clarify a few of the key differences and help you come to the decision that's best for your family. I do want to mention before we jump in that I do have a free homeschooling community group. It's on Facebook. I will link it down below in the description box. If you decide to move into homeschooling, or maybe if you just have more questions and you want people to talk to, join us. We would love to have you. It's a fun place where we can share our wins, what's going on, questions that we have. I'm going to be running some challenges through the end of the year. Lots of fun things happening in that group. So be sure to check the description box and join us over there. And then the second thing is that if you decide that you do want to move forward with homeschooling and you're not really sure where to start, I have created a totally free homeschool quick start guide. So it is meant to be like me sitting down with you over a cup of coffee, helping you to understand the big picture of homeschooling, what you need to do right now to get started. It is, like it is titled, a quick start guide. We're not going really deep into everything, but I am laying out for you exactly the steps that you need to take in order to begin homeschooling as soon as today. All right, so remote schooling versus homeschooling. I think one of the key things that's really important is to make sure that we sort of define what we mean by each of those. So remote learning, which is what so many people are doing right now, so many students are doing right now, basically involves your student doing all of their schoolwork from home, virtually, from a computer. All of the curriculum, the timing, the schedule, everything is laid out by the school. Typically, your child has to show up with booty in chair at whatever time, 8 a.m. And while that may seem like, great, my kid's teacher is teaching them through the computer, I don't have to partake or participate in any way. What most parents find is that that is not in fact true. You're still going to need to oversee things, ensure your student is doing the things they need to be doing. There is still, I would say, a surprising amount of involvement from parents. And this is not meant to be a discouragement for remote schooling. However, it can be really difficult, and you may have a child who, for them to be able to just sit at a computer for hours every day is really, really challenging. I know that I can think of 2 of my children that I don't think would be able to do that. So that's what a lot of parents are finding, is that their children are struggling with that simply because it's very hard to keep their attention. However, it does remove the responsibility of curriculums and testing and keeping up with educational standards and all of that off of your plate as the parent. You're merely sort of, I was going to say an overlord. That's not the right word. You're an overseer. You're overseeing what's happening here. You're not responsible for the creation or implementation of any of it. Now, obviously, homeschooling is going to require you as the parent to make those decisions, about curriculum, to make those decisions about schedule. You're going to not only be the one making the decisions, you're going to be the one implementing them. You're the one that's sort of taking over full responsibility for all of those things. And there are many different ways to homeschool. There are ways to do more of an online school that feels more like a traditional school environment. A lot of people will refer to that as school at home instead of homeschooling, because the general consensus, I think, for a lot of homeschooling parents is sort of the taking over of the education, them being behind the wheel, if you will, of the driving force behind what their kids are learning. And their goal is actually not to recreate a school environment at home. It's to have sort of the world become your schoolroom. The world becomes your classroom. So hopefully that helps you kind of understand the differences between remote learning and homeschooling and sort of school at home even. So now you need to look at your life. You need to look at the factors that are going to affect this. I think the number one factor would be your work schedule. Are you a stay-at-home parent or a home educator? I think I'm gonna make a push on social media for us to stop calling them stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads, calling them homemakers, because that sounds more like it's a job that you're doing versus stay-at-home parent makes it sound like you're just at home chilling. And we all know that stay-at-home parents are not at home chilling. But anyways, I digress. You need to look at how flexible your work schedule is. Are you working from home? Are you working outside of the home? I know a lot of homeschooling parents that work part-time or full-time outside the home as well as inside, doing something from home, and are still able to homeschool their kids. So don't think that just because you have a job outside of the house or a job that you do from home that means that you can't homeschool. But you need to look at what that schedule looks like and how helping your child through the traditional hours of remote learning, is that possible within your schedule? Or do you need something that is way more flexible like homeschooling? In my experience, I find a huge reason that a lot of parents will end up turning to homeschooling instead of virtual learning or online learning programs even is simply for that flexibility in their schedule, the ability to work the school stuff around their work schedule or other things that are going on in their lives or their families' lives. The flexibility it brings tends to draw a lot of people that direction. Again, I want to remind you that even the decision to homeschool your kids doesn't mean that you are fully responsible for every subject all the time. My children have taken certain classes outside of the home. There are lots of homeschooling co-ops and organizations. There's also online classes that your kids can take. My high schooler is taking a couple of online classes this year. So you're not responsible for teaching every single subject to every single child. If you choose to homeschool, there are ways to sort of create a schedule and a flow that works for you. The next thing, which I kind of touched on before, is I would think about, are there any special needs at play with your children? Like I mentioned before, I have one child in particular that I know, actually two kids that I know in particular would not be able to sit at a desk for virtual schooling, to be in attendance from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. or 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Every single day sitting in front of a computer. They just wouldn't be able to do it. It would end up creating a lot of grief in their life. And particularly in the elementary school years, I think we have a lot of flexibility with kids in what they're learning, the timing of what they're learning. And I think that parents we can end up getting into this like stress hamster wheel of like, my kid needs to know everything. My kid needs to know everything. Do they know enough? Are they falling behind? And sometimes that can drive us to make decisions that ultimately your kid ends up behind anyways because there was no way for them to sit and stare at that computer for 8 hours a day, which again, like I said, I say this as a parent of two kids who would not be able to do that. And that's why I think this whole situation is especially pernicious for families this year to navigate, is that, one school year of dealing with all this is hard enough. And now as we're moving into a second school year and parents are having to make some really difficult decisions, I never want someone to choose homeschooling out of fear or out of being backed into a corner. So I always want people to choose homeschooling out of freedom, out of excitement, and people coming to it kicking and screaming, feet dragging, not at all wanting to be here. I completely understand. It's just really disheartening because while homeschooling is wonderful and amazing, it is not for everyone. So it always just kind of breaks my heart a little bit to see families coming into homeschooling feeling forced and backed into a corner and quite frankly not in the least bit excited about doing it. That's really not the posture in which I am hopeful that people come to the side of homeschooling. But that is the reality for a lot of families this year. Now, there's another piece again. So we've talked a little bit about special needs. Depending on what those are for your child, remote learning may be nearly impossible. I don't have it done yet, but I am currently working on putting together just a little workbook a resource list, if you will, that will take you through the various tutoring options and stuff that I think are good and can be helpful depending on the needs of your child and what kind of tutoring that you need. But I know sometimes it can be a little tough to wade through all of that information online. So I am working on a resource list for that. All right, so if we've kind of gone through what your schedule looks like, your dynamic looks like, you've thought about your children's needs, if there's any special needs involved that make one option better or easier than the other, I think the next thing that I think a lot of people stress about, and I say this because it's one of the number one things I get emails and messages about, socialization. It is like the buzzword of homeschooling, and I am here to reassure you that no matter which option you choose, remote learning or homeschooling, first of all, remote learning, there's not going to be much socialization happening there. Certainly nothing face-to-face. Your kids might be able to sort of virtually see each other from time to time, but a lot of times they're just looking at the teacher. So there's not a lot of socialization happening at all in remote learning. In both options, remote learning and homeschooling, there is the option to add in additional activities for your child. To add in different, like I've mentioned before, homeschooling co-ops, groups, classes, karate, art class, sewing class, whatever it may be. We live in a relatively small town, and there is a ton of options, class options for kids, particularly for homeschooling kids, which really the main difference there is that those classes are going to take place during the week, during the day. And they're obviously going to be with other students who are homeschooled, which is great because then they can make friends with other students who live a similar lifestyle, have a similar schedule. But it also allows you to be freed up on the evenings and weekends to not be tied down to activities. And I think that's, something parents complain about a lot is their kids are in school all day and then they've got activities and then they go to bed and then weekends are activities, and it can feel a lot like a rat race. Now, if you're remote learning and having to keep the school's hours, obviously you're not going to be able to participate in the homeschool hour classes. You're going to have to still do the 6 o'clock karate or the 8 a.m. t-ball. But they're activities nonetheless. Lots of different ways for your kids to get out, meet people, be in the community, be active, be socializing with other people. That is one of the great benefits of homeschooling, is that depending on the grade level of your child, but for our children up until high school, we have no problem finishing school before lunch. So doing 3, maybe 4 hours of homeschool, and that's with a slow pace, taking breaks, all of that. And then they've got the afternoon, so we can do classes, we can easily fit in extracurricular things into the schedule and into our life, and also just free time, lots of free time for the kids to just go outside, be bored, play, be kids, not having every moment of their day structured. While it's important to have a rhythm for the day, something that your family can kind of rely on, your kids especially, in knowing like what's coming next in the day, I think we tend to want to fill up every moment of our kids' time. And not only is that not good for their brain development, it's not good for you to feel run down and ragged like you're just a carpool driver. Get those activities, socialization, church, swimming, gymnastics, art, sewing, whatever it is, but be sure to leave time for boredom. So all in all, what I hope you'll take away from this video is not that there is a right or wrong answer to remote schooling versus homeschooling, but that really the best thing is what's best for you, your family, your life, your schedule. Families can be so different with so many varying needs. There is really no one-size-fits-all answer for everyone. And like I've said many times before, while I love homeschooling, I'm a huge advocate for homeschooling, I also know that it's not the answer for everyone. So it's really helpful if we can just kind of pull back and bust out the old notebook and make ourselves a good old-fashioned pros and cons list. And if you're feeling a tug one direction or the other, see how you can make that work, what you think that's going to look like. I think a lot of parents are afraid. They don't like remote schooling. They don't like how their kids are responding to that, but they're afraid to jump into homeschooling. So don't forget to check out the quick start guide that I have linked down below in the description box. It's sort of like me taking you by the hand and walking you through this step by step so you can feel confident in starting homeschooling. And just remember that There's very few things in life that are permanent. I can think of a few, but there are just very few that are permanent. And making the decision to homeschool for a year or remote school for the first half of the year and go into homeschooling the second half if it doesn't work, there's some flexibility there. Again, there's different circumstances that make it less flexible. But for the most part, we're not etching anyone's name in stone. We're not selling them to a troll under the bridge. You're not giving away your firstborn. These are important decisions, but I think if you really sit down, think about it, go with your gut, and then just take the next step, walk through the next open door and figure it out from there. You can have a successful school year, your child can have a successful school year, and one of these days, life will hopefully get somewhat back to normal. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to join our Facebook group if you are very interested in homeschooling or if you are currently homeschooling. We would love to have you. It's a fun community. Check that out down below in the description box. And don't forget to check out the free Quick Start Guide if you want to take the plunge and aren't sure where to start. That's it for me today, and I will see y'all again very soon. Bye.
Let's say the things that we both know. Gonna take these words and